It's a desire we all share, to lead a rich, fulfilling, happy life. But you can't always get what you want.
Why are we so fickle? Why is it that one day the things that make us happy, the next day bring us misery?
This emotional life is a roller coaster, taking us from the heights of ecstasy to the depths of despair and every place between.
All emotions have a role in a healthy life. We're not automatons.
I'm Dan Gilbert, and in this series, I'm going to introduce you to everyday people who are searching for happiness, as well as to the scientists and clinicians who are trying to help them find it.
What I've taken away is the resilience of the human spirit. It is just amazing what we can go through and be okay.
At first, I thought I was going crazy. The dreams, the nightmares. But I'm not letting it beat me. What more can I say? I'm a happy camper.
We'll see how our greatest source of happiness lies in the people around us.
The lesson we've learned is that a basic need for human beings is love, is companionship.
We'll see what happiness is, what causes it, and why we look for it in all the wrong places.
I used to think that things would make me happy. More money, success. I'm realizing now that that's not the fact. Happiness comes from within.
But next, we'll explore the obstacles to happiness, emotions such as fear, sadness, and anger.
Have I lost it to the point where I did feel like I've lost it? Yeah.
I went through like 6 or 7 years of real depression. I just was never quite given the right pill.
Asking why we have them, why we need them, and how we can all keep them under control.
I remember Caitlin screaming, "You don't understand how horrible it is to be caught in this brain that doesn't work. And I want you to fix this."
Coming up, facing our fears on This Emotional Life.
This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Coney Island is an amusement park. Imagine that. An entire park dedicated to nothing more than a feeling. And there's a whole lot of feeling going on around here. People are happy and relaxed, excited and frightened, exhausted and relieved, and yes, sometimes even amused. Human emotions are a roller coaster, taking each of us from delight to despair and back again. We like the ups much more than the downs. But the fact is that emotions like anger, fear, and sadness have a critical role to play in our lives. Negative emotions are both our best friend and our worst enemy, and science is beginning to help us understand how that paradox is possible.
In the 80s, there was a poll done in one of the newspapers. The most heinous, people in the 20th century, It was like Jack the Ripper was 1, I was 2, Charles Manson was 3. It was like, wait a second, okay? I yelled at an umpire, okay? I didn't mutilate 40 people or whatever.
Anger feels hot. Even talking about anger, my whole rib cage is warm. My legs are mobilized. It's the fight. I feel my jaw getting clenched. I want to punch somebody.
I used to be the kind of guy who I would scream on the street. I was screaming on street corners when I asked somebody the time, and they go, I would scream. I'd get in fights,
I was in a bar, and I was with my girlfriend. Across the way, there were 3 huge dudes, and they were there chilling and sort of saying things amongst themselves about her. And so, you know, that really got to me to the point where I got up off my chair and I walked over to them, and then in a sort of methodical sort of way, you know, sort of start picking at them. You're a fat piece of lard ass, you rich mama's boy. You're being a real Do you understand that? When I want to hurt somebody, I'm not thinking about how could they hurt me. I'm thinking about how angry I am. It just drives you.
Mary is a Los Angeles-based writer and filmmaker who knows what it's like to be in the grip of anger.
I was born in Barranquilla, Colombia, which is on the northern coast of South America. My family moved here when I was 10 years old. My father was very frustrated. He would do things like punch walls and kick doors down and things like that. He was really tense. He was really angry. By the time that I was like 14, 15, I was really reacting. I was so angry at him that I wanted to, I almost kind of wanted to fight him to see who would win. Eventually, it sort of progressed, just sort of like a general anger towards people, towards things, towards a world that didn't understand me.
You can follow through a little more, too.
On the right or on the left?
Yeah, on the right.
On the right.
Yeah, especially.
Okay. When I get into arguments, get into fights, I only see that person or that thing in front of me that I want to attack. And then I'm acutely assessing the situation, but only for one purpose, and that's to win.
When animals are threatened, they experience a surge of hormones that make them ready to attack or to retreat. Human animals are no exception. Our fight or flight response is crucial for our survival.
Anger can feel exhilarating because what we do is trigger the fight or flight response. We secrete lots of adrenaline to power our large muscles in the event that we have to fight or flee from the predator. We secrete cortisol, which heightens our auditory and visual sensitivities. We stop digesting lunch because who needs to digest lunch if you're about to become lunch? Now that response is very appropriate when we're dealing with life-threatening danger. However, the yellow cab driver that cut you off in traffic comes to supplant the saber-toothed tiger that our ancestors millennia ago were dealing with. And when we look at what happens physiologically, we stay in this heightened state for quite some period of time. And because we're dealing with fight or flight, we're dealing with impulses that are very strong.
The emotions associated with fight or flight, emotions like anger and fear, are triggered deep inside our brain.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, tug!
And when we try to control them, we start a tug of war between our brain's oldest and newest parts. While ancient structures like the amygdala respond to threats by trying to turn our anger or fear on, it's newer structures, such as the prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of our brain, that try to turn them off. It's the tug of war between these two systems that gives rise to our emotions. At New York University, neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux has studied how the amygdala and the cortex shape our emotional responses. You know more about the amygdala than anybody alive, and you still can't control yours.
No.
Why?
Now, there's an interesting thing, again, that has to do with the wiring of the brain. This is, if we could just look at it here. So this is the human brain inside a skull. And the prefrontal cortex is here in the front, right behind your forehead. And that is the newest part of the brain. This is where we make our decisions. This is where we plan for the future and strategize. The lateral prefrontal cortex has no connectivity with the amygdala. The amygdala has super highways to talk to the cortex, but the prefrontal cortex has only back roads and side streets to get to the amygdala, and therefore it is unable to tell the amygdala, cool it.
But why are there no connections?
We're in the process of evolving as we speak, and those connections have not been put in yet. This thing was built to do fancy things cognitively, not necessarily to control our emotions.
The fact that we are not designed to have complete control over our emotions can have some unfortunate consequences.
I was in such a deep, dark place that I couldn't even really see myself. Like, I had become this, like, muddled thing of a person. I was so sad. I was so angry. I couldn't get beyond it. I realized I had to do something when I hit rock bottom. One of my friends invited me to a party, and I was having a great time, but because I'm a control freak, I decided that I wanted to change the song. I wanted to go over to the iPod and change the song. So the guy whose party it was came over to me and he's like, "What are you doing?" And boom, I just went off. I'm like, "Who are you?" And he was like, "It's my party, and I'm gonna play what I want." And I'm like, "You're a selfish and just slapped him across the face, and his glasses went flying across the room. And so at that moment, it was like everything sort of fell away, you know what I mean? Like, there were at least another 20, 30 people in the room, and I could see none of them. They just turned into like this blur, and all I could see was this guy. He grabbed a chunk of my hair and he hung on to it really tight. So I just started kicking him. I was just like laying on him, like, "Let go, let go, let go." I kept on saying, "Let go, let go." I just kept on kicking him, just kicking him and kicking him and kicking him, until he finally let go. And at that point, I started crying. You know? And it was like everything became real again. And all the people were there and they were looking at me with such like shock and awe, and I felt horrible that I did it. That's what hurts me. And that I shouldn't, you know, that it goes against my values, it goes against who I am, you know? That's what hurts me.
Think about what happens after an argument that was really intense. People feel terrible. Oftentimes they feel depressed afterwards. It's not a good long-term solution.
Anger is not a helpful emotion. It's not always an appropriate emotion. And in the cases in my own life when I've allowed it free range, I've allowed it action, I've always regretted it after. I can't think of a time when I've seen my own anger as something that was constructive for me or useful in the world.
But I've noticed where my anger comes out in subtle or not so subtle ways, and how it's wrought a lot of havoc in my personal life. So, including the anger that I've turned toward me.
Have I lost it to the point where I did feel like I've lost it? Yeah. It's not easy to feel like you made an ass out of yourself, perhaps, and get through that. But people do, I think people make mistakes every day of their life.
Can we outsmart our own brains? Can we learn to control our emotions? Stanford psychologist James Gross has spent his career studying what scientists call emotion regulation.
For me, emotion regulation is really the science of understanding how we can modify our emotions, harness their energy, so that we can direct them in ways that we wish to go. So for me, emotion regulation isn't turning down or turning off all emotions, because emotions, I think, are often incredibly helpful and are what make us who we are. But I think at times, it's great to have a set of tools that we can avail ourselves of so that we can change the course of the emotions that we're having.
To test his theory, Gross asked about 100 women to take part in an experiment. Each woman was wired up to a machine so that researchers could measure her heart rate, pulse, and perspiration. All physiological indicators of emotional arousal. First, the women were asked to recall a recent incident that had made them angry, and to think about the incident again and again. To keep turning it over in their minds, to consider and reconsider every detail. Scientists call this rumination. To Mary, this way of thinking came quite naturally.
I didn't understand why it was so easy for me to just go into these ranting raves and just become so obsessed on this thing. Okay, you forgot to call me. Why did you forget to call me? You should have called me. I don't understand. Okay, you were busy, but I reminded you several times. It's just, you become fixated on these things, and you don't take a moment to breathe.
In the next phase of the experiment, the women were again asked to think about the incident that made them angry. But this time, to try to visualize it as a neutral observer, or from the perspective of the other person. This is a technique that scientists call reappraisal. When the subjects ruminated, their cardiovascular system went into overdrive. When they reappraised, their bodies became calmer and their anger diminished.
One of the things that people for a very long time have repeated again and again is that actually there's an important role for thinking in emotions. And if you can change the way you think, you can change the way you feel.
Mary's introduction to emotion regulation came through a therapist who helped her explore the roots of her anger and suggested ways she could better control it.
One of the things that I've sort of grown to accept in the last couple of years, especially going to therapy, is that I have to stop myself and just take a breath, and then also think about the person in front of me, to really see them as someone who makes mistakes and maybe didn't say what they mean, or maybe had a rough day at work today. You're in the middle of an argument and you're so riled up and you're so ready to fight for something incredibly stupid that feels primordial. It's hard to think about the people around you and how it's affecting them.
Have you tried to put any of this into practice, like taking it out for a test drive, this advice?
Yeah.
Did it work?
It's hard work, but it works. You practice, it's like anything. It's like learning an instrument. You practice. And you learn some basic tools, and you always go back to those tools when all things fail.
Back in the day, I had to go to therapy, and I found it saved me because I was very, kind of self-destructive. I was always acting out. 4 years of that, twice a week, made a huge difference.
It's a wonderful thing to be able to go to somebody who didn't raise you, who you're not married to, who you don't have a 15-year friendship relationship with, and be able to tell them what you secretly are longing for or needing without feeling that you're going to be judged or that you're going to hurt their feelings if this comes out.
So by being able to unload these feelings to this doctor, and I did, I told her everything that was making me feel crummy. And we discussed it. When I walked out of there, maybe between the time I left her office and into my car, I was floating on air.
Psychotherapy has been with us for more than a century. Sigmund Freud was the first to suggest that emotional problems may be the symptoms of something much deeper, something more significant, something the mind is hiding from itself, such as a traumatic childhood experience or a forbidden sexual impulse. So he had people lie on his couch and talk about their dreams and their childhood in the hope that they might say something that would reveal the true cause of their emotional distress. This kind of therapy was intense, complex, and went on for a very long time.
Yes, 8 years I was on a couch, and 5 years I was allowed to sit up and face them. And
in a 1970s interview, comedian Woody Allen poked fun at the process.
I don't know.
How do you know, really? That's what it's always the big question mark for me is, when do you decide, I'm done?
That's a good point. I don't know if you're ever really done. I know that certain characteristics about me are different now than they were when I started analysis. I started when I was 22, and I'm 35. So I have aged. That's something.
That is progress, because
yes,
it's upward.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I can, when I have sexual relations with someone, I can now think of that person.
Rather than
somebody else, which is an enormous step forward to me.
How many years did that take? Where did that come in, roughly?
That just came in last week.
In recent years, Freud's therapy has evolved into a more streamlined form of the treatment, known as psychodynamic therapy. The television series The Sopranos introduced the therapy to a new generation.
So you're carrying all this guilt when your mother is clearly someone who has great difficulty in maintaining a relationship with anyone.
But she's my mother.
Psychodynamic psychotherapy focuses on the role of unconscious conflict in causing your problems in relationships, in your love life, in your work life, so that these are things that are largely hidden from you, but they're making you miserable. And the role of psychodynamic psychotherapy is to uncover them, to make them conscious, to make you aware of that.
The focus is on helping the patient develop insight into how things they feel today or expectations they have about life and about people come from their past. And that the insight itself helps them to change their behavior and their ways of thinking and helps with the symptoms they might be experiencing.
Psychodynamic therapy is based on the fact that people don't always know why they feel and think and act as they do. But in recent years, some psychologists have suggested that rather than searching for the hidden causes of emotional problems, therapists might just help people develop the skills they need to deal with them. This idea is the basis of a different kind of therapy, one that's helping people learn to control one of the most primitive human emotions, fear.
Christina Kelly is a freshman at Harvard. She's a great student and a terrific athlete. But she's deathly afraid to do something that millions of Americans find easy.
I am afraid of flying. It's not rational, and I know that, but at the same time, that's definitely just what makes it a phobia. I just can't. I know it's irrational, and I can't do anything about it. It's not that I'm afraid that they're gonna go crashing to the ground or that someone's gonna, try to take it over or anything, but there's not really anything that I can pinpoint as to why I'm afraid, and so I think that kind of adds to the whole overarching fear.
Is fear of flying really irrational? Do we have nothing to fear but fear itself?
I'm scared to death of dogs. I mean, dogs are scary things. They're these sort of strange failed human beings who have all these emotions, and yet they have these enormous teeth at the same time.
I always have that weird sensation when I'm out on a balcony or in a high place where the bottom is accessible, that I'm going to climb over the railing. That doesn't mean you're going to or you're even contemplating it, but the fact that you're in a situation where it's possible, it completely unnerves me. Does anyone else have that? Yeah.
I think our bodies are beautifully equipped. Our reptilian brains and our animal tendencies are generous and smart and helpful. And, if my house is shaking in the middle of an earthquake, I hope my body will kick into high adrenaline, grab my dogs and my turtle and grab everything and leave.
there are certain situations that have recurred over evolutionary time over and over again that cause fear. For instance, some nasty animal running towards you very fast and baring its fangs. That's the kind of situation that's happened not too often, but often enough, so that individuals who have what we call a fight-flight response have a lot of advantages over those who say, oh, hello, kitty. It's just not a good thing to be, laid back and mellow when there's a lion coming towards you very quickly. So in the clinic, of course, we call this a panic attack. Panic attack is just identical to a fight-flight response, and it's perfectly normal lots of the time, but not usually in the grocery store.
Many of the fears that we've inherited from our ancestors are perfectly rational. It makes sense to be wary of small spaces and thunderstorms and even snakes, like this fairly large python that's crawling on me now. But sometimes our fear is irrational. It's more intense than it ought to be, or it's in reaction to things that can't really hurt us. These fears are called phobias, and for some people, they're so debilitating that they need help overcoming them. In some cases, anti-anxiety medication can be helpful.
If someone flies a few times a year and they get anxious every time it starts to lift off or typically when it lands, there's nothing wrong with taking a pill for that.
If, on the other hand, you're somebody who has to fly several times a week or, a couple of times a month and it's part of your life, then that may not be the best treatment. Then what you want to do is to actually change your behavior.
Medications haven't worked for Christina Kelly.
With emotions, it's often a paradox, that the more we don't want an emotional state, the more that we experience it, right? And as soon as we allow the emotion to come, a lot of times it kind of starts to diminish more quickly.
Today, Christina Kelly will attempt to board a plane with Todd Farchione, the therapist who is helping her conquer the phobia that's kept her from traveling to visit friends and family.
Just the way it is, whether you feel things or you don't feel things, whether it's bumpy or not bumpy, you can handle that situation. That's the most important thing.
Dr. Farchione uses cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, which is extremely effective for people with specific phobias. About 85% of those who try it show significant improvement.
Cognitive behavioral therapy has got a different focus, which is on identifying and correcting dysfunctional thoughts and feelings that make you miserable. So a cognitive behavior therapist is not so interested in why you have those thoughts or feelings. He's interested, or she's interested, in basically getting you to identify them and challenge them.
We say you have a little machine down buried in your emotional brain, and it's spitting out all of these really scary kinds of thoughts. But because you're the one thinking those thoughts, you tend to believe it. So we have a saying in cognitive therapy, don't believe everything you think.
Christina's therapy started 2 days earlier when she met Dr. Farchione at his office. Most people sign up for a dozen or more treatments over a period of weeks, but Christina opted for a marathon session lasting 3 days.
Well, let me just start by asking you how you did last night.
Good. I tried to explain it all to my family, so okay. I think that helps me kind of go over it.
So at this point, how are you feeling about taking that flight?
I'm very nervous, and it switches back and forth between I can do this, and then suddenly I'll feel like this is really overwhelming and all at once, and I can't believe I'm doing this.
With panic, what often happens is that it becomes this cycle, that there's a recognition of the physical symptoms, and as a result of that, there's then an increase in the actual physical response, right? An increase in those symptoms, right? So as you're approaching the plane, for instance, if you start having physical feelings, and you say to yourself, well, they're not going to go away, or this is going to be really bad, this is going to be an awful trip, this type of thing, it's likely that physiological changes are going to increase, right? So one of the things that we want to do is we want to see if we can't elicit some of these symptoms, in part so that you can see that this is just your body doing what your body should do.
Early in the session, Dr. Farchione asked Christina to do a series of exercises that bring about some of the physical sensations associated with fear, such as dizziness, shortness of breath, and a racing heart. The idea is that once Christina becomes more familiar with these sensations, she will become less afraid of them.
And how similar is that to what you experienced prior to?
Pretty similar, like 6 or 7.
Okay, 6 or 7. That we're going to go into this this flight with no safeties, no avoidance, and essentially confront what it is that you're afraid of. And if that means experiencing those sensations in that situation, again, that's not a problem. Then it's a matter of allowing them to come and allowing them to diminish of their own accord. You know, if something's terrorizing you and bothering you, like let's not run away. Let's go find it, you know?
This is overwhelming.
If you had to rate it on a 0 to 8 point scale, where would you put your anticipatory distress right now?
8.
Okay. So it's pretty high.
Dr. Farchione encouraged Christina not to push the frightening thoughts aside, but instead to let them come to mind so that they can be examined or reappraised.
So what can we come up with as a good alternative here?
It's going to be hard, but it's going to be okay.
So it's going to be hard. I'm going to feel
scared and panicky.
Yeah, good.
One of the key principles behind CBT is that we can change our feelings by changing the thoughts that produce them.
We're not trying to stamp out all bad thoughts. In fact, that might be counterproductive. We're just trying to say, let's look at the alternative. Let's put this in perspective. Let's reappraise this. And oh yeah, you'll continue to have scary thoughts, but you know what? You can live with them. And when they do that, it actually changes brain function. There are changes in the prefrontal cortex, working down into the emotional brain, just by this really working hard on reappraising.
Allowing it to unfold is actually going to be the fastest way for it to diminish, right? But you're still scared, and we still need to do this. Yeah. Okay.
Your return boarding pass is stapled right on the back.
Now comes the decisive moment. Christina will attempt to board a plane. Cognitive behavioral therapy has a cognitive or thinking component, but it also has a behavioral component. We must go out and do the things we're afraid of so that we can learn from experience not to be afraid of them.
The important thing is that reappraisal. It has to be paired with what we call exposure, where people will begin to put themselves in the feared situation under therapeutic guidance and with the appropriate coping mechanisms, where their emotional brain can really begin to learn and become convinced that these terrible things will not happen.
What's wrong with the way that you're feeling right now?
It sucks.
What sucks about it?
It's not comfortable.
What's the most uncomfortable part of it? Is it the heart rate?
It's feeling like I'm gonna cry. And have been for the last 3 days. That's not fun.
Okay. So it's feeling as though you might cry, and what is the implications of that? What if you did cry?
I'm not gonna cry.
What if you did?
That just makes it worse.
It does?
Yeah.
Take a moment to review the safety information card in your seat back pocket. Passengers seated in rows 9 and 10 are also asked to review exit row seating requirements.
What we're trying to end up with is somebody who can totally accept the full range of their emotional experience. Be aware of what their emotions are doing in the way they're making you feel, the way they're making you think, the way they're making you behave, and accept that and sort of be with it and distance yourself from it. And in so doing, put the emotion in its place.
I still like this idea of you moving around a little bit, so if we can, great.
Like get up or just?
Yeah, you to get up, maybe see if there's anything in the overheads that you might need. If you want, you can put my coat over the overhead or something along those lines.
Okay.
Do it quickly. I don't want there to be that hesitation. There it is. No. Go ahead and put my coat in the overhead for me, please. The one moment that really stuck out for me was the moment at which she was willing to get up. She didn't want to do it, but she did it. You know, I mean, she knew it was the right thing to do, and she committed to it. That was the point at which I felt very good about her ability to overcome this problem. You're getting there. You're getting there.
Slowly but surely.
I'm gonna say actually, I don't think it's as slowly as you might imagine, but you're doing a fantastic job. Absolutely fantastic.
Thank you very much. I might see you again soon. Thank you.
See you guys. All right.
I like them.
It's like yeah, they were nice, right? It's, I wish we had like some triumphant music. Now this is where we pull out the iPod and you put on like maybe like the Rocky theme or something like that.
I flew. It's exciting. Not as bad as I thought it was gonna be, but I did it. And that's the first time I've gone in a real plane in 2.5 years. And just the fact that I did is empowering. And I'm glad that it was successful. And in the middle, I felt better. So it's good.
Fear is an emotion shared by many other animals. But human fear is unique in one important way. It's not limited to clear and present danger. Sometimes our greatest fears are about things to come.
I mean, an air conditioner can drop off a building. You know, this is not irrational. When I'm walking down the street and I think about air conditioners dropping off of, you know, the edges of buildings onto my head, even if somebody says, well, it's only a 1 in a million chance that's going to happen. I mean, there's 8 million people in the city, and so that's actually like a lot of air conditioners.
Sometimes when I'm really happy and things are going well, that makes me anxious because I think, oh God, you know, life is so tenuous and fragile. In an instant, it could all change.
I have friends that sit there and the glass is half full. My glass, somebody said to me the other day, is not only half empty, what's in it is filled with poison. So I am always anxious. If anxiety prevented me from doing what I want to do, I wouldn't be sitting here. No, I think it spurs me on.
Anxiety isn't something, if you're born with it, that you can hope to eliminate. It's something that you learn to use. And to the degree that you can use it, and it's a useful emotion in that way. It's like having your own little pump of caffeine running through your veins, and you turn it on. You order up a triple anxiety cappuccino.
Anxiety is an inevitable part of modern life. We worry about our jobs, we worry about our children and our health, we worry about money. Our ability to think about things that haven't happened but might can make life a stressful experience. Stanford University neuroscientist Robert Sapolsky is the author of a book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. He's spent his career trying to understand stress and the toll it takes on our bodies and brains. According to Sapolsky, the problem is that our minds don't turn the stress response off once a danger has passed.
Well, the basic problem is that we're so damn smart. I mean, you take a zebra, I'm sure there are some very insightful zebra out there, but they're not one of the more sort of nuanced species. As far as I can tell, a zebra is sitting there eating grass, and what it's thinking about is eating grass, or maybe somebody would like to mate with. A lion shows up, all hell breaks loose. The zebra survives, and 5 seconds later, it's back to eating that grass. There's no anxiety, there's no close calls, there's no existential pangs of what does it all mean. And it's not till you get to us that we are smart enough to imagine our own deaths, or be moved by Beethoven, or read about kids in a refugee camp on the other side of the planet and have a stress response. We're dealing with a very different species. And what that mostly gets you is the ability to turn on the stress response chronically for purely psychological reasons. We turn on the exact same stress responses as a zebra running for its life, and we turn it for hours and days and weeks and career-long periods, and that's not what it evolved for.
Just as our brains can imagine the future, so too can they remember the past. Memory is one of nature's greatest gifts, but it comes at a cost. Because we can re-experience past events, we can be terrorized today by things that happened long ago. And that's what happens to people who suffer from PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder.
You can't afford to have feelings when you're in a war. You kill or be killed. That's your main objective. Live and come home. After you see a war zone, yes, your mind gonna change.
Warren King was a 19-year-old former high school football player when he joined the Marines and went to Vietnam. He would return a different man.
First couple of weeks when I came back home, it was kind of rough because that's when the dreams, the nightmares started, you know what I mean? But at first I laughed about it, you know, it's dreams, you know what I mean? But it started getting more deeper into me.
Although Warren was in Vietnam for less than a year, he relived the war every day for the next 3 decades.
I knew something was wrong, but I didn't pay no attention to it.
So how did you know that you had PTSD?
Well, at first, I didn't know I had PTSD.
What did you think it was?
First I thought I was going crazy. You know, like I was losing my mind, you know. And then, eventually, I'll start remembering these dreams. And I'll start remembering where it took place. The people was in these dreams. And then, it started getting worse. I started drinking more, doing drugs, don't want to go to sleep. You know, eventually I was killing myself.
For more than 30 years, Warren couldn't keep a job or even stand to be around other people. Eventually, he stopped leaving his house.
I was possessed. My life ended. I didn't have nothing. Sometimes I didn't want to live, but I was too scared to kill myself.
Doctors at the Veterans Administration gave Warren a range of medications: sleeping pills, antidepressants, anti-anxiety drugs. But nothing helped. Every night, the war in his head raged on. Although any kind of trauma can lead to PTSD, combat soldiers run an unusually high risk. Because traditional treatments fall short, tens of thousands of soldiers and their families are struggling with the disorder.
Yeah, he did. He got a rope on that one. You got a little piece of that one, didn't you? Huh? Come on, sis. Just throw it.
Bob is devoted to his wife and their 2 young children. But his mind keeps returning to something that happened in Iraq.
Uniform stuff and flashlights are still dirty, see? And my letters all here from my wife. I got more stuff down in the bottom. I kept my uniforms and boots just for keepsakes. Smell that smell? Can't get it out. Can't get it out.
In 2003, Bob crossed into Iraq as part of the first invasion forces. Within days, he found himself on the outskirts of An Nasiriyah in one of the bloodiest battles of the conflict. The horrors of war were all around him. But one image in particular is burned into his memory: the face of the Iraqi soldier who died in Bob's arms.
Our column was moving, and there was a bus, and it was on fire. And there were people screaming and yelling. As we went by, trying to assess quickly what was going on, and there were two guys laying there, and one of them was missing his leg, and the guy next to him had a big hole in his chest. So we knelt down, and I just looked in the guy's face, and I just looked at him. I took my helmet off, and I just looked at him. And he died looking at me. He literally breathed out his last breath and did his little rattle and stuff looking in my face, and I watched his eyes go gray. And right now, as I tell you about that, I can see his face as clearly as if I'm looking at the floor, just that clearly. It's not some hazy memory. It's very clear, very clear. The voices, the words exchanged, the feeling, and that's the part I hate the most. I can feel what I felt as clearly as I felt it then.
Nightly, he would wake up from a nightmare, or he'd be talking in his sleep, waking up. He'd be walking through the house on patrol.
I didn't have that problem before. I mean, anybody who sits up in their sleep and talks and stuff like that, it is what it is. But not getting up and going on patrol, or getting up and, reliving a trauma scene again, or getting up and shouting orders, get me some cover fire over here, I got problems, this and that. That's not normal.
Medication and psychotherapy haven't helped Bob much, and the tragedy in his past continues to wreak havoc in every aspect of his life. 3 weeks ago, Bob lost his job as a news director of a TV station in Reno.
We're moving. We're leaving Reno. We're going back to the Bay Area to start over. And do what, I don't know. I do think that the symptoms of PTSD that I deal with every day, and the fact that I don't get a lot of rest because I can't sleep. So, yeah, it contributed to me losing my job and probably my career.
I worry about the stress of everything. I can't tell you how many times in the last couple months I've just rolled over in the middle of the night just to make sure he was still breathing. Because I just don't know how much more he can handle.
We didn't have a color tape for Mom. I'll tell you what's embarrassing to me is having to go back to my mother-in-law's house and regroup. I've never had to fall back like that before. It makes me feel like, I've done all these things in my life and I just can't. How did I get in this position? I feel like I failed and I let my family down.
So what causes PTSD? Why do our brains sometimes remember the very things we'd most like them to forget? Emotional events leave long-lasting traces in memory. That's why we all know just where we were at 8:30 a.m. on September 11th, but not on September 10th. What gives these memories such staying power? When people experience intense emotions, their bodies release stress hormones such as cortisol and adrenaline, and some scientists now believe that these hormones help burn in memories of the events that caused the emotions in the first place. For nearly a decade, Larry Cahill, a neurobiologist at the University of California, Irvine, has been studying the connection between stress hormones and memory.
The experiment we're going to be running today, we're going to be looking at the physiological components of your emotional response.
To investigate the connection, Cahill and his colleagues designed an experiment in which 2 groups of students reported to their laboratory and watched a slideshow of disturbing images. After the slideshow, the students in one group were asked to hold their hands in a bucket of ice water for as long as they could, an experience that caused their bodies to release stress hormones. The students in a second group were asked to hold their hands in a bucket of lukewarm water, with no release of stress hormones.
Thanks for coming again, and I should explain that we did mislead you a little bit last week. So last week
A week later, the students returned to the laboratory and were surprised with a memory test.
What we're actually going to do this week is I'm going to ask you to try and remember some of the images.
The results were not what most scientists expected.
Some of my colleagues, because they come from a slightly different perspective, they thought, well, you know, if you learn something new and then do something as distracting as dropping your arm in ice water, that should be really bad for memory. It should be really bad for the memory of what you just learned. You should forget it. Memory should be worse. And I can understand that, but that's not what we found.
The results of Cahill's experiment showed that the students who had put their arms in ice water immediately after viewing the slideshow had much better recall of the images. The stress hormones coursing through their veins somehow burned the experience they were having into their memories.
A good memory is exactly that, a balance between keeping what you ought to keep and getting rid of or abstracting what you can get rid of or abstract. What we think we have here with this whole business of stress hormones is a beautiful system built in for doing just that.
Does the kind of research that you and others have done give us any insights into disorders like PTSD?
When someone experiences something too traumatic, a rape, a horrible car crash, being in a battle, it could be that this normally very helpful memory boost system that we've been talking about somehow, and for reasons we don't fully understand, gets stuck in the on position, right? And in the period during and after the trauma, repeatedly strengthens a memory, strengthens a memory, strengthens a memory. The retrieval of the memory causes the stress hormones, and the stress hormones keep strengthening the memory, and you can imagine a positive feedback cycle.
For Bob, moving to California to live with his mother-in-law has left him demoralized.
You guys gonna go outside and play?
Lori and the kids are trying to adjust to a new routine and a new school, but Bob's PTSD holds each of them in its orbit.
Welcome to California. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Welcome back. Here we go. Okay, so today we're gonna talk about Gabriel and how he's doing in first grade, and he's only been here for a little bit of time, but he's transitioned well. So he's showing some good leadership skills with his peers, with both the boys and the girls, and he seems to be happy. And if he needs help, he has no problem in asking me.
Hey, try to do it quietly,
Sarah,
please.
don't throw those, please.
Sarah, can you make a happy face with that?
Can you
with the yellow?
How about being quiet? That'd be something new.
Oh, there's just so much to do. Okay, no more dumping it in. Just
There you go. Perfect, Gabriel.
All right.
Sarah.
Okay. We'll clean those up later. Okay?
Sorry about that.
That's okay. I have 20 of them in here.
I cannot stand loud. I can't. Noise sends my temper and my blood pressure up.
He's doing really well. And his writing, I'll show you a little bit of his writing.
The hardest part about post-traumatic stress for a married woman is the focus is on him. But part of me feels like it's not okay for me to break down because the focus is on helping him and lifting him up and getting him through this time. He's so fragile right now. This time has to be about getting him through and getting him to a place where he feels like he's on solid ground again. Then I'll have my time.
I love you, baby.
PTSD threatens to destroy everything Bob cares about. As he looks for a new job in California, the obstacles seem almost insurmountable.
I was mobilized twice, and I did the invasion, and we just moved back to California. We were gone out of state for 20 months, and been back about a month. Age limit. No matter what.
No matter what.
I'm too old. Only looking for officers, huh?
Yeah, entry level.
Yeah. Some retail management, a lot of management in the news business.
The market is running tough right now.
Yeah.
Because,
I appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Before he left Reno, Bob learned about a new form of cognitive behavioral therapy to treat PTSD. But the treatment, a variation of the one used to treat phobias, would require Bob to confront the memories that haunt him.
The counselor up in Reno made me promise him I would look into this program that they have. But you know what? I'm just not there yet. I'm not scared of it. I just don't want to. I'm not afraid of it. I relive a lot of them all the time anyway. Why don't I want to go relive them again? You know? I just ain't there yet. It might be a good program, but look, I'm all for doing something that might help me, but I'm just not there yet. I don't know what's going to get me there, but I'm not there yet.
The treatment that Bob just can't bring himself to try is the treatment that saved Warren King's life. By 2008, Warren had given up on the treatments he was getting. Then he came across an ad in a newspaper.
I'm reading in the paper, and I see this University of Pennsylvania, PTSD, come to 3535 Market Street. So I said to myself, oh, here come another fluke. Here come another VA, you know what I mean? They're gonna give me medications, but they didn't.
At the University of Pennsylvania, researchers were developing a form of CBT called prolonged exposure therapy. Instead of hiding from his traumatic memories, this therapy would require Warren to embrace them, to relive them over and over again until his fear of them diminished. Reliving horror isn't easy. 5 weeks into his treatment, Warren was still trying to avoid the pain.
We can do this one more time for today.
Okay. Starting to feel okay. You really gotta push it, don't you? I gotta laugh because I ain't never had nobody push me like this.
You can do this. That's why I'm pushing, because I know you can do it.
Only for you, Coach. I wish you could come here with me. I wish it. If anybody could come with, I wish you could come and see what I see.
I'm trying.
You know, because it's a dilly. Okay. And I want to cry, but I can't cry. I feel my eyes, but I can't cry.
That's okay.
What, I'm dead inside?
It's okay. You'll cry when you need to.
Warren needed to face his memories both in and out of his therapist's office. The movie Full Metal Jacket had always sent Warren into a panic. Now he forced himself to watch the movie again and again. Eventually, it began to get easier.
We think that what's happening in exposure therapy is new learning. A lot of times people years ago used to think that in our work with anxiety that we were erasing a fear memory, and we know that that's not true. We're not erasing the memory, we're teaching the person new things. We're teaching them, for example, I don't need to be scared of this memory. Yes, this was a terrible thing that happened, but I don't need to be scared of it.
I can go there, I can think about it, I can talk about it, and I'm okay. And that's new learning.
After 18 sessions, Warren's progress is unmistakable.
What I wanted to ask you to do today was to go through the story again, to do the imaginal exposure. And you remember how we do that. We have you talk about what happened from your memory. You know, close your eyes and really try to visualize it and put yourself back there, really try to revisit it. Close your eyes, visualize the memory, and start talking about it.
We came in, we started taking machine gun fire. And everybody know that sound. When you hear that sound, you have to get down low as you can. You're afraid. And more you're going, you see people lying there with their guts out. There's nothing you can do for them. Then they're calling you by name. That's the worst part, but there's nothing you can do about it. You know, doctor, you just gotta keep moving on. You just gotta go there and do your job, you know what I mean? And it's no time for guilt. Because he's always told, kill or be killed. That's the name of the game. I'm okay. No sweating of the hands, no headache, a little teary, but as far as that, I'm all right.
Let me ask you this. If I had PTSD and I was haunted by dreams and haunted by thoughts, I'd want to get away from them. And the last thing I would do would go see a therapist who says, oh no, we're gonna talk about them. I'd say, oh no, I see enough of that at night. I don't want to see that during the day. Can you relate to people feeling that way?
Well, I used to be like that. I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to say nothing about it. But you gotta face it.
Do you think there are a lot of soldiers who might not even ask for help because they have kind of this sense that I'm supposed to be brave, I'm supposed to make my way through this, I'm not supposed to ask other people to help me?
Well, they're fools. They are fools. Because sometimes you need to drop that macho thing and ask for help, because if you don't ask for help, you're going to die. And that's what you're going to be, macho man? Well, you know something? The graves are full of macho men.
I've been doing this work for over 20 years now, and at times the emotion in the room is just palpable. It's raw. I have felt like I was holding someone's broken heart in my hands. It's been so raw. But part of what I've taken away from this work is the resilience of the human spirit. It is just amazing what we can go through and how we can come through it at the other side and be okay.
Would you say you're better now? Not just a little better, but all better?
Well, I'm not gonna say I'm all better, but I know how to handle PTSD. You never get rid of PTSD. There's no cure for it.
It doesn't sound like your treatment helped your life. It sounds like it gave you your life back.
The day I went to that program till the day, it's the best years of my life I ever had. I have a life. You know what I mean? Like I say, I'm not letting it beat me. You know what I mean? I am doing well than I ever been in my whole 30-something years when I had PTSD. You know what I mean? What more can I say? I'm a happy camper.
Every human life has its share of sorrow, and there's just no getting around it. Sadness rolls in like a fog. We cry, we mourn, and eventually the fog lifts and we get on with our lives. But for some people, sadness gets a grip and just won't let go, and that's when a normal human emotion becomes a psychological disorder.
Depression is these feelings of sadness and anxiety that hit a bottom and continue inappropriately long. It's almost about duration.
Sadness is manageable.
Depression is not, and I think that's the major difference between them. It's a question of scale, and I think it's tricky in our own lives to sometimes make that distinction as to whether we are feeling simple human sadness or whether we've fallen into something else. One of the great things I've learned, the opposite of depression is not happiness. The opposite of depression is vitality.
It's not just a sense of melancholy. It's not just a pervasive sadness. There are more hideous aspects in the sense that it affects your concentration. It affects your cognitive abilities.
Talked to her, said that she's really, really sweet. And I'm Caitlin, and I'm 18. Say your last name. Oh, yeah, well, Caitlin Davies. Okay, I'm Megan Davies. I'm Caitlin's twin, the younger twin, by 46 minutes. Yep. I'm 18 years old also. Tomorrow we graduate high school.
2 years ago, Caitlin Davies was diagnosed with clinical depression. Her identical twin, Megan, showed no symptoms of the illness. We asked the twins to record video diaries during the summer after they graduated from high school.
Yeah, you won't be practicing together that much. Is there anything you're feeling optimistic about?
The future. I'm excited to go off to college.
That's good. Are you taking a math class?
Caitlin, optimistic.
Well, I'm feeling optimistic about next year and the possibilities of the summer and things like that. But again, that's also for me a double-edged sword. It's also what I'm feeling pessimistic about and worried about next year, going off school. How am I going to be able to handle that?
Despite her depression, Caitlin maintained a straight-A average in high school and remains determined to go to college. But as she prepares to graduate, she finds herself spiraling downward once again.
Depression. It's not like having a bad day. There's just so much more to that. The exhaustion and the lack of focus, lack of motivation. It's just everything, because sadness is something that you can. It's the easiest of all of those things to deal with, because there is an outlet for that. Like, how do you have an outlet for lack of motivation? How do you have an outlet for lack of focus? Like, lack of energy? Like, what can you do about that? At least with sadness, like, you can, you can write, you can cry, but you can't do anything about all those. And it's just so much more than just emotional. It's so much more physical than what a lot of people think it is, because your body feels it. You feel down, you can't move. You can't get up and do what you want to do. And it doesn't matter how much you want to do something, you just can't.
At 18, Caitlin is waging a fight that could determine the course of her life. She must devote all her energy to getting well enough to leave home at the end of the summer.
In closing, let me just say this. This has been the opportunity of a lifetime to serve in this branch. It doesn't get any better than this. Time comes on, and I've decided that it was time for me to leave. I never imagined that I would get elected, and, it's been the best. Thanks very much.
Senator Robert Antonioni has served in the Massachusetts state legislature for 20 years. For most of that time, he was a very public man with a very private secret.
I think that my struggles with depression began in 1999 when my brother committed suicide. I had all sorts of feelings of guilt, responsibility, neglect that I carried with me. I felt very traumatized with my brother's death. And the way that I dealt with it most often was to remove myself from the normal daily events. And for a politician, that's not a good thing, because politicians don't get elected by removing themselves from the public. They get elected by being in the public. I would frequently go home. I would just curl up and burrow myself in. And I'd sleep, excessively. I frequently would think, I just got to get a hold of myself and stop feeling this way. Real men don't cry. And if you're a real man, you'll get over it. Cut it out, get it together. I can remember one day in my office just sitting down crying, and my chief of staff said, "Bob, we got to do something about this." That gave me the inclination that something had to be done here. We had to deal with this. Yeah.
Bob sought the help of a psychotherapist. As he began to talk about the loss of his brother, he discovered something important about himself.
When I began therapy, I found it very hard to talk about what I was feeling because I was not accustomed to doing that. I had never opened up the way that I did with the therapist. Eventually, I came to understand that the hurt and the feelings that I had on a regular basis weren't just related to my brother's death, but that I had an issue with depression. And it had been there for a long time.
It's not bad to be sad or bad to be angry, but when you are persistently sad over a long period of time, and it's not about the moment, it's about something that happened, that's a time when you have to say, well, what's going on with my mind and my body and my spirit?
I remember thinking, I'm having a bad week, and then the bad week turned to a bad month, and then that turned to a bad year, and then it turned into a bad 4 years. And then I remember being absolutely terrified because I thought, have I turned a corner that I will never, ever be able to fix?
The most fascinating thing about depression is that you can't pin it down. You can't say it's just sadness. You're saddened by the fact that you're not in control of your thoughts. There's no desire to get out of bed and do things because you're not sure you can do them with any great sense of judgment or without any sense that'll make you feel better.
Depression doesn't just change the way we feel. It actually changes the way we see the world. Dr. Ian Gottlieb, professor of psychology at Stanford University, is trying to understand just how deep these changes go. In one of his experiments, a group of women with a history of depression and a group of healthy control subjects watched faces on a computer screen. The faces started out with a neutral expression that slowly transformed into either a happy or a sad expression. The women were told to press a button as soon as they noticed the transformation. Gottlieb found that non-depressed women were much faster to notice the expression becoming happy than the women who were or had been depressed.
We've been finding that depressed people tend to guide their attention to negative things. When there are both negative and positive things happening, they'll tend to really focus on the negative. They attend to more sadness, and importantly, they remember more sadness. So those memories of sadness stay with them longer. Depressed people remember the criticism, they don't remember the praise, or they discount the praise, and they say, it just wasn't warranted, I didn't deserve it. And even things that are neutral, they tend to interpret as more negative.
Gottlieb's studies suggest that this isn't something that depressed people are conscious of doing. Rather, they just seem to be especially sensitive to negative information. One of the things that distinguishes depression from normal sadness.
These thoughts are so automatic. They're part of us. We go through the day, we have all sorts of thoughts, reactions, and I'm sure you've been in a car and 15 minutes later you're at a different intersection with no real memory of how you got from the last one to this one. But you did it, and you did it safely, but you did it outside of awareness, and you did it automatically. And for depressed people, that's what these thoughts are like. They're just automatic, knee-jerk reactions.
So we'll start with the first saliva sample. If you could take the top off of that and put the cotton swab in your mouth, and I'll time you for 3 minutes.
But why are some depressed people prone to negative thinking? In another experiment, Gottlieb set out to explore the biological underpinnings of this thinking style.
So now we're going to do a math activity, and for this task, we'll ask you to start off at the number 400 and count backwards by 7s.
He subjected a number of volunteers, some at risk for depression, some not, to a difficult mental task and measured the level of the stress hormone cortisol that was in their saliva.
Start.
400, 393, 383, 300.
That's incorrect. Please start over.
400, 393, 386, 371.
That's incorrect. Please start over.
400.
The results were clear. Under stress, people who were vulnerable to depression generally produced higher levels of cortisol than people who weren't.
In doing this, one of the things we found is that people who are depressed and people who are prone to becoming depressed are actually more biologically reactive to stressors. When they're confronted with a stressor, they have no control over it. They secrete more cortisol, the stress hormone. They don't mean to be more reactive. That's a genetic factor over which they have no control. And that goes along with this attention to negative events. There's a whole picture of just a greater reactivity to negative information. You can't learn, for example, easily to control your cortisol output, to control this stress hormone. But you can learn to respond differently to stressors. You can learn to recognize stressors, to not have a gut reaction to them as, oh my God, this is horrible, but to say, aha, now I need to do something. And that's a very different response, and it elicits a very different stress hormone response.
Psychotherapy helped Bob Antonioni realize the role stress played in his depression. But he was unprepared for his therapist's recommendation that he combine therapy with medication.
It took me several years to feel comfortable taking medication. I was afraid political opponents or the media would somehow uncover that I was taking medication, receiving therapy for depression. I would go to a drugstore that was half an hour from my house. I saw a therapist 45 miles away.
As a senator, Bob began advocating for funds to combat mental illness and prevent suicide. But he hid his own depression from all but a few close friends. Then one day, in 2003, he decided he'd had enough.
I was asked by a local reporter, why was I advocating so much for these things? And I disclosed my brother's passing and how he died by suicide. And the reporter asked, Bob, did you ever suffer from depression? I said that, yes, I have depression. And she said, are you sure you want to say that? And I said, yeah, it's the truth. The day after the story appeared, I went to a big function in Boston. All the political people were there. And I remember walking into that auditorium thinking, what an idiot. Why did I say all that? These people are going to think I'm nuts, you know? Well, let me tell you, as soon as I saw someone who knew me, they came up, hugged me. Bob, I'm so proud of you. I'm so glad you talked about this. Thank God, more people are just running up to me. You'd think I just won the Stanley Cup or something. And, I was really taken aback. I was shocked. And I said, wow, okay, thank you. I didn't know what the reaction would be from the public, but people were like, wow, thank you. I'm so happy that you're talking about this. And it was, the reaction was just unbelievable. It really was. It was pretty cool. Yeah.
You've been to the bottom of this. You look like you're at the top. You look like a guy, you strike me as a person who, at least at the moment, is feeling pretty happy, pretty optimistic about the future, pretty confident in the decisions you made.
I do. I'm really happy about it. I'm very fortunate. I'm in the place where I am now because of the medication and because of the therapy. But life-changing decisions can make things easier too. Deciding not to run for re-election and to have one focus, in this case, practicing law, has made life so much more manageable and enjoyable. I'm not constantly anticipating the next shoe to fall, or the next problem to arise. Now I feel like I'm more in control of things and managing things easier. There are many moments in my life now when I am happy. Bicycling promotes happiness for me. Doing fun things promotes happiness. I don't consider myself cured from depression. It's something I have to continue to deal with. But like high blood pressure or cholesterol, there's medication I can take and things that I can do so that happiness becomes more possible.
I went through like 6 or 7 years of real depression. I just couldn't quite figure out what it was, and I just was never quite given the right pill. I put them on Prozac, put them on, that's, it's still trial and error with most people, I think, who suffer from depression. But with the help of the right therapist and with the help of finally the right prescription medication, somehow I knew I'd come out of it.
I'm someone who has been on antidepressants for 15 years, and I always question, is it good or bad, but am I making the right choices for my mind and my body?
I felt very conflicted about medication because I felt that it was some sort of a concession, that I was a failure. However, it helped me a lot. I had felt there was this sort of endless, infinite pit of despair that I had fallen into that had no bottom and that was very likely going to end in suicide. And the medication brought that up to a point where I knew I could land on that and I wasn't going to go any deeper.
It's clear that depression can have a profound effect on the way we think and feel. But there's growing evidence that it might do more than that it may affect the physical structures of our brains. Yvette Chalene, professor of psychiatry at Washington University, has been studying this possibility for over 15 years. In 1993, she began a series of experiments to see if she could find an abnormality in the brains of people with depression.
Including loss of interest in things, you just didn't care about things that used to give you pleasure. At the time that I started to do this work, the idea that there was a connection between depression and the brain was kind of anathema. I mean, people really didn't believe that. It took me 4 different times to get my grant funded because people really didn't buy that idea.
No, I can usually always sleep.
Mm-hmm.
In her studies, Chalene compared a group of women who suffered from depression with a group of women who didn't.
So what I wanted to do was to go back and talk about some of the different episodes of depression you've had throughout your life.
After a detailed psychological examination, Chalene used MRI to measure the activity in each woman's brain. She was especially interested in the part of the brain known as the hippocampus.
This is the very outer edge of the hippocampus, and as we get really close to the center of the hippocampus, this is the sort of typical seahorse shape that people talk about.
From previous studies, Shalene knew that depressed people experience elevated levels of stress hormones, and that over time, these hormones can damage the hippocampus.
The hippocampus is a very delicate part of the brain, so it gets damaged easily. It's kind of like the canary in the coal mine, a signaler of something being wrong.
After the brain scans were completed, Shalene began the painstaking task of measuring the size of each woman's hippocampus.
I was doing all this data analysis myself because I didn't have a statistician or anything at that point in time. And we finally had all the data and we got the results. I was just really excited.
A pattern emerged from the rows and rows of numbers. The hippocampus of the average depressed woman was smaller than the hippocampus of her non-depressed counterpart. A second study revealed even more disturbing news. The longer a woman had been depressed, the smaller her hippocampus tended to be.
It's evidence that this is a brain disease. It's not just a lack of willpower. It's not that people are just being lazy. It really is an illness like any other illness.
Shalene's findings remind us that mental illnesses are nothing more or less than physical illnesses that happen to impair psychological functioning.
To have a physical basis for depression, I think, really is helpful. You can say, look, this illness not only makes you feel lousy and have trouble with all these aspects of your life, but there's a physical basis in the brain, and we can show you right here, this part of the brain is affected.
Remarkably, Shalene also found that people who took antidepressants did not show hippocampal shrinkage, suggesting that the medication may actually keep the brain from being damaged by depression.
So the good news from examining treated versus untreated depression is that if you have been treated for depression, you don't get the volume reduction in hippocampus. It means it's absolutely critical to have early intervention and early treatment for depression, that the sooner you can catch it, the more likely you are to not have any hippocampal volume loss.
Although antidepressant medications clearly can help people with depression, no one really understands why. Many scientists have assumed that antidepressants work by changing the chemistry of the brain, by increasing or decreasing the level of important chemicals, known as neurotransmitters. But recent discoveries suggest that antidepressants may actually do much more than that.
Neurons in the hippocampus, these newborn neurons, triple labeling.
Ronald Duman, professor of psychiatry at Yale University, suspected that antidepressants might alter the brain itself. He and his team gave antidepressants to rats and then analyzed their brain tissue. After months of carefully counting the number of cells in each rat's hippocampus, their analysis revealed something that no one had ever expected. The antidepressant medication didn't just change the brain's chemistry, it actually caused the brain to grow new cells.
So this is an example of how we're able to see new neurons in the brain. And this is a cross-section of a rodent brain through the hippocampus, the part of the hippocampus where new cells are born. And you can see with antidepressant treatment, you get an increase in the number of these new darker cells.
This looks really quite amazing. 3 weeks of treatment with an antidepressant, and I'm seeing substantially more cell growth in the hippocampus of the rat that's gotten the drug than hasn't. What did you do the first time you saw this picture?
We were just jumping up and jumping off the lab bench here and
growing new neurons of your own.
Yeah.
Duman's findings stunned the scientific community because they suggested that antidepressant drugs might be helping the brain repair the cellular damage associated with depression.
It was really just incredibly novel and remarkable. I mean, it's something that has really changed the way the field thinks about depression and how antidepressants work. There are actually new cells that are being born with chronic antidepressant treatment.
Duman's research is helping scientists understand how antidepressants might help reverse the effects of clinical depression. But antidepressants don't work for everyone. Depression
depression, like most mental illnesses, is a combination of experience and biology. Experiences such as divorce, death of a loved one, even the birth of a child can trigger depression, but they only seem to do so among those who are already vulnerable to the disease. That's why two people can have identical experiences or identical genes, and yet only one of them will become depressed.
We're taking pictures, Mom?
Yes. Yes, you need to be. Oh, you can get photo albums. Here.
I have so many things. I'm so talented.
I don't know, Megan. That's what looks good.
So it looks good.
It's graduation day, just 10 weeks before Caitlin is supposed to go to college. Although she rallies when she has to, her family is increasingly worried that the antidepressants are not helping.
Okay. They'll tell us how to wear it when we're done.
All right.
All right.
Yay. You're almost there. All right, give us a cheese.
Cheese.
When Bob and Tricia married, they knew they wanted a family. Their son Evan was born first, and 2 years later they had twins.
There we go. Is that the side you're supposed to have it on?
We don't know. This is how Katie said she reversed it.
Oh, she's supposed to be
Me.
Yeah. Megan and Caitlin may have come out of the womb together, but they'd been different ever since. From the beginning, they're always holding hands, constantly playing with each other. They always had a special bond from the beginning. Caitlin always seemed to be a little dominant in terms of kind of arranging their social life and doing things and being in charge. Starting at the end of 8th grade, I started to notice that they kind of did almost a complete reversal. Megan was always filling the silence and becoming the social, outgoing, talkative one. And I noticed that Caitlin, I don't know, she just didn't seem to be always chattering and always happy like she used to. I used to call her my little sunshine, and it occurred to me that there were not a whole lot of sunny days anymore. So I really started to worry that her life was not the way she really wanted it to be. At this point, I was thinking that Caitlin needed help. I finally went online and the Depression Center's questionnaire came up, and that was very scary. Because when I was able to answer yes to pretty much every question, it occurred to me that that she must be depressed.
Hey, there's Sheila. Hey, Sheila. Hey, guys.
How are you?
Good. Howdy, stranger. How are you?
First time I've seen Caitlin in a long time.
When Caitlin initially came in, I felt quite confident that we would be able to turn her around very quickly with our traditional first approaches. So typically we would begin with one class of medicines, and that I felt would certainly turn her around within the first 3 months, and that's fully what I expected. However, for Caitlin, that turned out not to be the case. So we found ourselves going through 1 and then 2 and then 3 and then 4 and then 5 different classes of medication treatments.
As summer begins, Caitlin is running out of options. She's tried different kinds of medications and therapies, but she isn't getting better.
I would love to not be having the worst summer of my life. I can't get out of bed. If I can get out of bed, maybe I can make it downstairs, but it's not like I want to watch TV all day or sit inside. It's like you want to go outside, you want to be with your friends, you want to be running around, and you can't. It doesn't matter how much you want to, you can't. And it just sucks. It
So, it's Thursday, and this is Megan. Caitlin doesn't mind that I'm off doing things my own. She actually, like, encourages it. She thinks it's fine. But, I mean, it's just really hard. Because I always had that sense of guilt. But if I'm going out there and I'm having fun and I'm enjoying life, but she's not being able to do the same things that I am and not finding joy in life and not having fun in everyday situations, how can I not feel guilty about that? I think she knows that the rest of us are struggling, but I just don't think she knows how much and how deeply this is affecting the rest of us. Once again, this is Megan, and I'm out.
Because therapy and medication have failed to help Caitlin, one last option remains open to her, one that might surprise many people.
Most of us know it as electric shock treatment, but it's actually called electroconvulsive therapy, or ECT. For 70 years, ECT has been used to treat severe cases of depression that haven't responded to psychotherapy or medication. As movies like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest remind us, ECT was once a primitive and painful procedure, but technological advances have made it far less traumatic and virtually pain-free. ECT is a highly effective treatment for depression, but no one really understands why.
Do we know if ECT is more effective than the antidepressants in causing the neurogenesis?
Ronald Duman's studies might offer a clue. Working with rats, he's found that ECT is even more effective than antidepressants in stimulating cell growth.
Tell me what I'm looking at. They're beautiful, but they're more significant than that.
Here we're showing that the cells that give rise to new neurons are actually increased in number by electroconvulsive therapy.
This is really quite amazing. There's just a lot more of these blue cells on this side than on that side.
The example that we're showing here is the effect of chronic electroconvulsive therapy, that ECT leads to a very dramatic increase in numbers of new neurons, much greater than what we see with antidepressant treatment, with a chemical antidepressant treatment.
Although experiments with rats can't necessarily be generalized to human beings, these results do offer an intriguing insight into how ECT might work and why. In the early morning hours of July 7th, Tricia drives Caitlin to the hospital for her first round of treatment with ECT.
All right. Should have brought your pillow. Caitlin herself was the one who made the decision that the life that she was leading was not how she wanted to be. So I was taking a cue from Caitlin. I remember her screaming at one point, "You don't understand how horrible it is to be caught in this brain of mine, this brain that doesn't work. And you'll never know how awful this is. And I want you to fix this." She would strike out at me at unexpected times. Nothing I could do was good enough for her. But I knew in my heart that she's such a sweet, thoughtful kid, and she had told me how much she loved me at one point in her life, and points during this whole process that I knew that she really didn't mean it.
Welcome.
Hi, Brad.
How are you?
Good to see you again.
Nice to see you.
I was the one who said to the doctor, "What about ECT?" I just kept researching what kind of things help with depression. So I've kind of put it out there.
So how's your mood been? I take it your mood's been down?
Yeah, it's been down.
Do you have any periods in which you feel good? In which your mood feels good?
Not really, I would say. No.
We definitely had a lot of reservations because we knew that it was a serious process and procedure, but Caitlin was severely depressed.
And any thoughts of suicide? And even to the point where you wish you were dead?
Sometimes.
Okay.
I just felt like nothing was going to stop us from getting to this solution here.
Do you understand this is treatment for depression beyond the meds?
Yeah.
You got some hope that this will work?
Yeah.
Dad's gonna say goodbye, okay? Just kidding. Maybe you're right. See you know if you.
Functioning is like a 4-letter word to me.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good, you're functioning, but that's no way to live. And it's no way to continue going on. It's the worst thing in the world for me.
The anesthesia team here taking care of you today. We're going to hook you up to some monitors here.
Can we do a timeout?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell us what your name is, Caitlin? What have you done today?
ECT.
Okay, all right. Everybody concur?
I concur.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so half.
Come your head towards me. Great.
ECT is perhaps one of the most misunderstood treatments for depression. I think many people view ECT with an eye toward One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, a sort of archaic, medieval treatment that they can't fathom anyone receiving. In point of fact, ECT is one of the treatments that turns around difficult depression more quickly than many other treatments. And for moderate to severe depression, frankly, is a treatment of choice, particularly if an individual has failed the traditional psychotherapeutics and pharmacological treatments. Most of the time, anesthesia is present, so the individual does not have any memory of the procedure itself. They will remember some of the preoperative procedures and often will remember waking up in the recovery room, but otherwise they have no memory of the event itself.
Okay, we're ready, guys. Let's go ahead. Okay. Go ahead, please. Amit. Go ahead. So she's still seizing right here. Are you okay if we take these? Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
All right.
So she got the Zofran too?
She did get the Zofran 4.
Slowly waking up, probably with the extra.
All right, Kayla, and we're going to take you to recovery now.
The problem with letting depression linger is we know that there are subtle changes in the brain such that it's an illness that becomes harder to treat as you let it take its course, so to speak. The other major problem with depression, especially in young people, is that you lose years of that individual's life. Human beings change a great deal during adolescence. So while somebody is struggling with depression, they're unable to make the social gains, the intimacy gains, the academic gains that are so necessary when somebody is developing from an adolescent to a young adult. So it essentially robs people of years of their lives during a period that they're struggling with these internal symptoms.
Caitlin, you hear me? You're done. It's all over. It went really well. Yeah, it's all over there. Yeah, okay. I'm gonna just get a little sip. It's gonna be a little hard for me to do that. Take a sip. You don't have to sit up all the way. Okay. It's ginger ale. Is that right? You want water?
The doctors told Caitlin that the average course of ECT is 9 sessions. But the number of treatments Caitlin will have depends on how she responds.
Hi, it's Caitlin. I think treatment's going okay. I wish I could see a little more improvement. I saw a little bit, like last week, I saw a little bit of an improvement where, for the first time, I was really happy, and I was just happy, didn't have like anything going on. I was just happy, and I wish that would have stayed longer, not where I am right now.
Several weeks later, Caitlin's family is starting to realize that ECT is not going to be the miracle cure for which they all were hoping.
Caitlin came home from treatment. This would have been the 7th treatment. And it was, at that moment, the worst treatment day we'd had. We had been told that maybe after about 6 treatments, you would start to feel better. And so she had it in her head that she would feel better. So she came home and she was angry and she felt horrible. And I finally lost it with her, and I made this little comment that she needed to try harder to move on. And she absolutely lost it with me. She started screaming that I didn't know how hard she had been trying and how awful this was, and that she didn't want me to be anywhere near her, and screamed at me to leave the room. So I did. And I think what happened was that she had felt better, and she was so upset about feeling better all the time. And this is one of the things I think is such, I don't want to blame the doctors, but no one ever prepared us for this ups and downs quite so much at the right times.
Despite the disappointments, the doctors suggest moving forward with additional treatments, as many as 3 times a week. By mid-August, something seems to be changing.
Hello, it's Megan. Caitlin. It's been a while since our last video entry. For the first time, I actually, I remember just for the first time being happy for longer than, I just remember being happy for longer than, like 5 seconds, and it was just the most wonderful thing, because I hadn't felt happy like that for an extended period of time, and as long as I could remember, and it was just the most amazing thing for me, because I did feel happy, and it did last longer than the first second, and it's just really, really nice. And I mean, it's still really hard for me to get moving, but that was just really great, because I go off to school in less than a month. So it's looking good, and I guess we'll do another entry later in the week, and we'll fill you in more. So once again, this is Megan, Caitlin, and we'll catch you guys up later this week. Bye.
Happy? Sit up straight. I hate when you do that. I know. Well, look at me.
Shortly after her 16th treatment, Caitlin tells her family she feels ready to try college.
Why should I let you go to school tomorrow? I'm scared to death. You have to let me try. But how can I let you go? Because I'm doing so much better. Why do you want to leave? I'm worried to death. Tell me why I shouldn't worry.
Because I'll do fine.
Why?
Because I'm
responsible, and I'm a strong person.
Okay.
And
you feeling up to this?
I'm feeling up to it.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to know. All right.
You scared?
Yes, I'm scared. Are you scared?
A little bit.
Just a little?
I'll be fine.
You'll be fine. Okay.
I'll be fine.
All right. That's all I needed to hear. That you'll be fine.
All right?
All right. Good girl.
Oops. Again!
We're headed to school. I'm ready for this little birdie to fly the nest, broken wing and all. It's just going to be such a huge leap for her. That's the biggest, scariest part. But Caitlin is in great shape. She has really come through this experience so much better. The doctor said that her assessment was wonderful, that she's way out of any kind of depression level. So it's very exciting. All right, now really hug each other.
What does that mean?
I don't want anybody to think that going through ECT is going to be an easy solution. There was just so much pain and struggle that went through that. It's not like taking a drug and going to bed. It was just awful.
Hi, Caitlin. I love you. Have fun, too.
So I think she just really showed her inner strength throughout this process because it was very difficult. I'm really in a good spot, too. Really happy for her.
Everyone wants to feel happy. Happy all the time. But nature has a different plan for us. Our brains were designed for survival, and the negative emotions they create are vital to that mission. We need to feel afraid, sad, angry sometimes. But we need to feel those emotions in just the right amount. Too little is bad, and too much is worse. Science reminds us that we're of two minds. A rational brain that's relatively new, and an emotional brain that's relatively old. Sometimes emotion overwhelms reason. Sometimes reason outwits emotion. But it's the endless struggle between these two that makes life such a wonderful, scary, and mysterious ride.
$10,000.
15? 15, you think?
20, 21,000?
600.
20. 18.5.
24.
It's at least 40.
Look at it.
4,500,000.
650.
20.
650.
This textile would be worth about $500,000.
$500,000?
No way.
I knew it's just a blanket.
Laying on the back of a chair. Well, sir, you have a national treasure.
Wow.
A national treasure. Congratulations.
I can't believe this.
To learn more about emotions that challenge us, visit the This Emotional Life website at pbs.org. This Emotional Life is available on DVD. To order, visit us online at shoppbs.org or call PBS Home Video at 1-800-PLAY-PBS.
Next time, what does happiness mean to you?
Money is happiness.
Do children make you
Yes,
happy?
mine do.
Marriage, do you think it's a source of happiness for most people?
No. If you don't have a job that you like and you're not having sex, you're just not going to be happy.
Is there a secret to happiness?
I won the lottery, but being happy takes work.
I feel 100% exactly the same person that I was before my injury.
Join us for the next episode of This Emotional Life tomorrow night on PBS.
This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.